Pastor Frank DeMora here with the End Times Research Ministry. You're at my BibleProphecyMan.com website. Today I just want to give you very briefly a little bit of information about the Ezekiel war. This is a war that has not been fulfilled yet. It's a warning that we find in the Old Testament by the prophet Ezekiel. And specifically, if you've never heard about this prophecy, you might want to read chapter 38 and 39, because in those chapters, the Lord in detail tells us who it is that is going to come and assault the nation of Israel. There's going to be a host of Islamic nations who will attack Israel, thinking that they are going to destroy the nation of Israel. And this attack is going to happen when Israel thinks they're living in security, peaceful security. It's going to happen at a time when Israel has no walls, no bars, nor gates for protection. And that just reinforces the fact that they'll believe that they're living in a time where they don't need such barriers to keep their enemies out. And always, I'd like to let people know that if they want my book, they can read this documentary on Bible prophecy and current events called The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth that you see here. Go over to my website, just click the link, and this book will come up. You'll be able to read the book today for free. And I keep it updated, so all the latest information is going to be in this book right before you in a matter of moments, depending on the speed of your computer, of course. But what I want to do is I want to go over to a section of the prophecy in Ezekiel, and you're going to see why, because there's some news about Turkey, and there's a lot of people that don't understand the role that Turkey is going to be playing in the near future when it comes to the Ezekiel war. So once the book is loaded, you'll see in chapter 11 the invasion against Israel. So I'm going to go over there and point out some interesting facts about Turkey. Now, as you'll see right here in chapter 11, Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 10 and 11, and it says this: "This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of," number one, "unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without," look at this, "walls and without gates or bars." So they think they're living in a time of peace, and of course that's when this attack is going to take place. So you can get all the information you want from this chapter, but what I'm going to do is just break it down, give you the meat of the material, connect the dots between Turkey and what's happening in the news. According to Ezekiel, we see the host of enemies as you see in this photo. And Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Armenia, Russia, and coming, according to the prophecies, they'll be coming from the northern quarters, and they're going to assault Israel in the latter years. So the Lord has given us specific time when this attack is going to happen. When there's peace, when Israel has no bars, gates, or walls, when they're thinking that they're living in a peace, and it will happen in the latter years. And when the Lord is talking about the latter years, he's talking about just prior to the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, many people put Gog as the leading force that comes down into Israel. Gog leading these massive nations, the Islamic nations, against Israel. And I believe that Russia will be coming from the north, and if you look at a map and you see where Israel is right here, if you go directly north, you run right into Moscow. But I believe that Turkey is going to be the leader of this massive army, and this is why. Now, for the answer, is Turkey the one that's going to be coming down leading this assault? I'd have to go back to the book of Revelation, and you'll find this in my book in chapter 2, where I explain to you what we see from that revelation. So let me just read this short 2 paragraphs, and you'll understand why I'm saying that it's going to be Turkey. This is what I wrote in my book. Now, let us take a look at Revelation 17:9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. What are the 7 mountains? They are 7 kingdoms. What rules kingdoms? 7 kings rule them. Many people in the western part of the world have read this verse and come to the conclusion that just because Rome has 7 mountains, that means Jesus is talking about the Antichrist coming from Rome. But is this what Christ is really pointing to? I don't think so, and you'll see why. Let us now take a look at Revelation 17:10 through 12. There are 7 kings, and keep in mind they're rulers of kingdoms. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. What is Christ showing us? Now, to break it down, I put a picture of those 10 horns. Who is writing this for us? It is John the Apostle. John is telling us 5 kingdoms, empires, have fallen in the past. When John was writing us this information from Christ, he was in the midst of the 6th kingdom. Where is that 6th kingdom? It's right here, Rome, when John was alive. What was John showing us? He was telling us that the Grecian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Syrian Empire, and the Egyptian Empire had already fallen away. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and of course John was writing in the 6th, as we see in the scripture. In the last days, the woman in Revelation chapter 17 rides on 7 heads, which shows us all of the ancient empires of the past come back again because the woman rides the beast with 7 heads and 7 kingdom, which is described as 7 mountains. So it's really easy to see what John is showing us when you take a look at the history, because every one of these kingdoms came, they fell, and the Turkish Empire was the 7th empire to come. The scriptures talk about the 10 horns, and in order for this theory to be accurate, we'd have to find the 10 horns. You'll see Egypt has a horn, Assyria, that's the 2nd, Babylon the 3rd, Medo-Persian the 4th, the Grecian Empire is divided by 4. And the reason why this is divided by 4 is because when Alexander died, his kingdom was divided into 4 different parts, given it each horn. And then there was the Roman horn and the Turkish horn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 horns and 7 kingdoms. Exactly what we see in the Revelation. John was living in the 6th kingdom, but we are told in verse 10, 1 must come, which will be the 7th kingdom. What nation hasn't come yet? To answer this question, we just need to ask, what nation came after the Roman Empire? And we know who that was. It was the Turkish Ottoman Empire. So in my book, I break it down very simple for you. This is what I said. The 7th kingdom was the Ottoman Empire or Turkish Empire, which was Muslim. It was actually the eastern side of the old Roman Empire. When the old Roman Empire fell, the eastern part did not fall apart. We must not forget that Daniel chapter 7 shows that each one of these kingdoms was represented by horns, which you already saw. When a new, stronger kingdom came up, that kingdom plucked the horn from the other weaker kingdom. Take a look at the picture of the 7 mountains again. As you can see, each mountain is a past kingdom, like I said, which ruled what by who? By, obviously, a king. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 12, Jesus shows us that these kingdoms as horns, which I already showed you, and notice, if you will, that Christ points out to us that there are 10 horns, which I showed you. So what was John telling us? What was he warning us? John is also telling us to watch out for the seventh kingdom. Why? Well, when you read Revelation 17:11, which says, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth in perdition." Well, there's only one kingdom that fits to this category completely, and that is Turkey. Because Turkey was part of the seven, it was no longer, just as the scripture says, but then it's coming back and will be the eighth. Now, the Turkish Ottoman Empire is back into existence now in our generation. And Turkey even recognizes the fact, and I'll show you documents, that they came out and say that they are the Ottoman Empire. Now, I've been following the news, and I did notice that Turkey is definitely on the move. You'll see this in the Arab News, September 16th of 2009, Turkey's new role examined. Turkey is basking in the glory of its resurrection as a major regional power with Ankara seeks to fulfill the needs and goals of its growing geographic importance. It's a major turnaround in the foreign policy agenda of the 86-year-old Western-oriented secular republic, which has risen from the ashes of the, get this, Ottoman Empire. And of course, this was the Byzantine side of the old Roman Empire that was set in place after the Roman Empire fell. But the eastern leg did not fall. And here is another interesting article that came out October the 23rd, 2009. Turkey seeks restoration of Ottoman Empire. As Turkey increasingly shows signs of uninterest in joining the European Union, Ankara is looking to regain its historic ties in Central Asia with the idea of resurrecting the grandeur of the Ottoman Empire, according to a report from the Joseph Ferris G2 Bulletin. So the rebirth of the Ottoman Empire, or if you will, the seventh kingdom, turning in now to the eighth kingdom that Jesus talked about in the book of Revelation. At least that is definitely a possibility. Now, if you jump to 2018, for example, you'll see that there has been many articles written about Turkey and the power and the Ottoman Empire rising. One of them was from the Foreign Policy with the headline, "Erdogan is making the Ottoman Empire great again." It's a long article, but in short, what it's saying is that he's bringing this Ottoman Empire in part back by bringing in the Bosnians, the Muslims who live in Bosnia. Here's another article from the Boston Review, August the 8th of 2018. It's under Politics, Erdogan's Ottomania. Turkey is entering a new era. Following the failed military coup against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in 2016, a referendum last April approved sweeping constitutional amendments amid a government-declared state of emergency and allegations of electoral misconduct. The changes call for a super executive president without robust checks and balances. And as a result of June's presidential elections, not only is the government being reorganized under Erdogan's authoritarian leadership, but Turkish society is being recreated in the vision of, look what it says, of the Ottoman past. So what we see written in the Revelation, we see happening in the generation who saw the rebirth of the nation Israel. And of course, that is the nation who was supposed to see all these things taking place. And this generation, according to what the Lord shows us in Matthew 24, will not pass away until all these things take place. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that this Turkish empire that was actually part of the Roman Empire, the Empire of Rome, fell, and the Turkish Empire took over. And it lasted for a while, but it also fell, and now It's the eighth kingdom coming back, but it was part of the seven. So you see how easy it is to understand what John has shown us via Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation. Just yesterday, President Donald Trump, as I said, recognized the Golan Heights was sovereign to Israel. This hasn't happened with any of the other presidents before Donald Trump. And this is a real sensitive area when it comes to the Muslims, and it's definitely been a sensitive area for the leader of Turkey, Erdogan. And here's a short clip showing you the disapproval of Turkey with this new proclamation that the Golan Heights is sovereign to Israel. Watch this.
Reuters reports Turkey condemned the United States' recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights on Monday and called it a violation of international law. A foreign ministry spokesperson said, quote, "This unfortunate decision demonstrates that the U.S. administration continues its approach to be part of the problem rather than part of the solution in the Middle East." On Monday, in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, U.S. President Donald Trump signed a decree recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the territory that Israel seized from Syria during the 1967 Middle East War. The statement said, quote, "This decision is completely null and void for Turkey."
So when you read the Revelation and you see the Turkish Ottoman Empire had to come back and you see it back, then the next thing that you would have to look for would be the alliance that would be forming, showing us that the nations listed in the Ezekiel war would be coming together to get ready for such an attack in the near future. And Turkey, Iran, and Russia, in the next article you're going to be seeing some information, but keep in mind these are the three most strongest nations in the list of nations in that Ezekiel war. So there is significance when you see such an alliance being formed. Look at this. This is foreign policy in focus. An emergent Russia-Turkey-Iran alliance could reshape the Middle East. The article says an unusual triple alliance is emerging from the Syrian war, and of course Syria is mentioned also in prophecy from the Psalm 83 war, which will be taking place before this Ezekiel war, but they're allies, all of them. One that could alter the balance of power in the Middle East, unhinge the NATO alliance, and complicate the Trump administration's designs on Iran. It might also lead to yet another double cross of one of the region's largest ethnic groups, the Kurds. However, the Troika alliance, Turkey, Russia, and Iran, consists of three countries that don't much like one another, have different goals, and whose policies are driven by a combination of global goals and internal politics. In short, fragile and complicated doesn't even begin to describe it. How the triad might be affected by the joint U.S., French, and Britain attack on Syria is unclear, but in the long run, the alliance will likely survive the uptick of hostilities. So this is a very, very interesting section, and let me explain why. Not only because you have Russia, Iran, and Turkey forming this alliance, which anybody who knows prophecy you could expect that's going to happen because that's exactly what the Lord showed us, but you also have in this paragraph that you see the U.S. and Britain here. Now this is significant because the U.S. and Britain, I believe that's also mentioned in that Ezekiel war. Let me show you briefly. Now in Ezekiel chapter 38, in verse 13, it says the following. Sheba and Dedan are Saudi Arabia. Those are the names that we found in the Old Testament, but we know them today as Saudi Arabia. And the merchants of Tarshish, Tarshish is Great Britain, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? Well, the young lions, since Great Britain is known as Tarshish, who broke off from Great Britain? It was Australia, Canada, the United States. So when you come back to this article and you'll see who's allying together, there's the United States and Britain, you're seeing the same people that are mentioned in the Ezekiel war. Of course, on different sides, but they're mentioned. and they're taking alliances together just like we see in the Ezekiel war. So when you're watching the news broadcasts and you see the combinations of these nations who are coming together, forming these alliances, and they're identical to the ones in Ezekiel, what can you expect? Well, you should expect that this war is going to take place, and the people who are mentioned by God are going to actually come together and fight against Israel and another group opposing that attack. And those opposing at this time, United States and Britain. Now, when you go over to my book, you'll see that I have a host of information showing you how Canada, the United States, and Australia have really joined to the hip together when it comes to policies in the Middle East. The young lions, in other words, coming together, just like the scripture tells us. Now, what's interesting about this article, it says, meeting in Ankara. The parties pledged to support the territorial integrity of Syria, find a diplomatic end to the war, and to begin a reconstruction of Syria devastated by 7 years of war. Now, Syria, if you haven't seen the pictures, it looks like Isaiah 17:1 was fulfilled, but it hasn't been fulfilled yet. And what I mean by that, Isaiah 17:1 says that Damascus is going to be left in a ruinous heap. And it almost looks that way, but Damascus hasn't been destroyed yet. It's the oldest living city ever that hasn't been destroyed, and that prophecy hasn't been fulfilled yet, so it comes as no surprise. The triad that we see here, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, make an alliance, friendship with Syria, and want to protect the territory. And this really comes into play when you talk about the Psalm 83 war. If Israel takes out Syria, and this triad of nations that we see listed here, see what Israel does to Syria, it'll take action. And the action at the end of the day will be coming first by the Psalm 83 war, but then later the Ezekiel chapter 38 war. So it's really not complicated. It really isn't. When you read the scriptures and it tells you the very nations, gives you specifically who they are, the direction of where they're going to be coming from, how many people are going to actually die, how many people are going to actually be able to go back to where they came from after the war. When you know these facts and you begin to watch the news, you should have no trouble connecting the dots between the warnings of God for the future concerning each and every one of these nations who are listed in that prophecy. And Turkey is going to play a major role in the future, because I believe that the evidence is overwhelming that the Ottoman Empire that used to stand is now back, and they're joining alliances with those very nations that were outlined in the scriptures. So we should be paying a lot of attention to the Middle East and what the Ottoman Empire, or Turkey if you want to say, what they're doing in the Middle East. Very, very significant in the news. Now, in closing, here is something that's very, very interesting to me. When we look at Ezekiel 38, verse 13, for example, when it's talking about Great Britain, which is Tarshish, and the young lions that broke off from the Great Britain Empire, they're going to be in the theater when this Ezekiel war breaks out, along there with Saudi Arabia. And in our generation, as we saw the rebirth of the nation Israel, which I already mentioned, when all these prophecies are going to take place, do you think that it comes by coincidence that the Bible talks about the young lions, and you have these exercises, military exercises, joint military exercises by different nations that are been named Exercise Eager Lion? I don't think it's by coincidence that they named it this. And when you look at the participants that are coming together involved in these military exercises, let me scroll down to the very end here and it'll show you. Take a look. It says about 10,000 total military personnel participated in the exercise, in addition to Jordan, and here's one of the young lions. In other nations participating, again, the name of it, Eager Lion, include, here's the other break-off, Australia. You have Canada, which is the other young lion. And you also have participating Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, and then look at this. You also have Saudi Arabia. So the participants that are mentioned in Ezekiel just happen to be involved in eager lion exercises, and that they're the same people mentioned in the Ezekiel war. Just something for food for thought. So in that Ezekiel 38, where we see that these, Great Britain, which is Tarshish, and the ones that I talked about, the young lions, and Saudi Arabia, they're given a formal protest as this massive Islamic army comes charging down against Israel. So, however it happens, between the time that Saudi Arabia actually attacks with those bordering nations in that Psalm 83 war against Israel, to the point where they get to be friends with Israel, as we see that they're starting to do right now. By the time that the Ezekiel war breaks out, Saudi Arabia, along with the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and Australia, will be given that formal protest. So let's face it, when this Ezekiel war takes place, there are going to be so many people coming down to attack Israel that there is no way could a limited force stationed in the Middle East be able to react to millions upon millions of Muslims coming down to tear Israel out of their nation. And I believe that it's going to happen so fast that these nations that are listed as the young lions along with Great Britain won't be able to react, and they'll give this formal protest. But as I said earlier, it won't be lost, because God will come to the aid of Israel and defeat the massive, and I mean massive, army that will be coming against the nation of Israel. And if you're a Muslim living in any of these countries that you see listed here, and you want to go down and attack Israel, I'm praying that you'll take a second look at what the Bible says about the outcome of Ezekiel, because there's going to be a massive wipeout of the nations coming against Israel. Very few people being able to go back where they came from after that war, as I already said. As a matter of fact, 1/6 of the invading army will go back. That's it, out of millions and millions of people coming down on Israel. And if one thing is for sure, when the world sees this army, massive army coming down on the news, most of the people who are watching the news who don't know these prophecies are going to think that Israel is going to get wiped out. But all of a sudden, just the way God opened up the Red Sea to allow the Jews to cross the Red Sea to flee from Pharaoh, we're going to see a miracle performed by God, who assaults these armies that are coming against his chosen people, the Jews. He chose the Jews. He's not finished with them, because they don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. But the day is coming where the Jews will understand that their Messiah was always Jesus Christ. And their blindness in part will be taken away, and they'll see Jesus for who he really was when he first came here, and who he still is now. God, the God that walked among the people the first time he was here, and he'll be walking amongst the people again in Jerusalem the second time when he comes, which is, in my opinion, not that far off concerning all the signs of the last days. Now, I started off to talk to you about Turkey and how Jesus, through the book of Revelation, shows us who this eighth kingdom is, Turkey. We also saw that Turkey is going to be involved in the Ezekiel 38 war. Take a look now, current events. This article came out March the 27th, 2018. Headline, World War III. Turkey's Erdogan calls for Army of Islam to attack Israel on all sides. What part of the Bible in Ezekiel 38-39 now do you not believe? We're looking at events preluding to the battle there. Ezekiel chapter 38. The article says this: less than a month ago, the Turkish state mouthpiece, the Daily Yeni Şafak, ran an article for Erdogan titled "A Call for Urgent Action," and on the newspaper's website headlined, "What if an army of Islam formed against Israel?" It called for the 57 member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, to form a joint army to simultaneously attack Israel from all sides. The article said if the member states of the OIC unite militarily, they will form the world's largest and most comprehensive army. The number of active soldiers would be at least 5,206,100, while the defense budget would reach approximately $175 billion. In my opinion, you're looking at the man described in Revelation. You're looking at the man described in Ezekiel 38, that war against Israel. And again, don't be surprised that he's calling for an army, a massive army, to assault Israel. Now, Zechariah chapter 12 talks about Jerusalem being the burdensome stone. That prophecy most definitely has also come into fruition in these last days. Jerusalem is the burdensome stone. And Turkey's leader just got through saying that there's a red line, and that red line was changing the capital of Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he warned Donald Trump about changing the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and said it was going to be the red line. Watch this.
Turkey's president threatened to sever diplomatic ties with Israel if President Donald Trump recognizes Jerusalem as the Israeli capital. According to several reports out Tuesday, Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the decision would cross a red line for Muslims. Several countries have urged the U.S. to reconsider recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. We previously reported the change could prompt Trump to move the U.S. embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
I'm hoping that this cleared this issue up for you. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to go over to my website. Email me those questions. I'll leave my email address at that website today as soon as I'm done posting this video. Or you can make a comment and ask questions in the comment section of the YouTube video.